Well, look at the VA. I mean, hellish health care for our veterans. More than half the money gets spent on administration, not on the health care. And reading this bill, it is just a giant boondoggle. It gives the insurance companies government immunity. It gives the hospitals immunity. And you talk about globalization, global governance, all these things that are happening. They have to get rid of local control to the national level if the national is going to be handed over to the international. And we've interviewed Nigel Farage, former leader of your party, and others. We've interviewed Lord Monckton and others who talk about global governance. The new head of the European Union, as you know, Herman van Rompuy, says this is the first year of global governance. They believe the Copenhagen Treaty was the first year of global governance. Can you speak to this pan-global Europe that the EU talks about, the European Union model taking over the planet through treaties? And I remind listeners, 3 years ago, George Bush signed a transatlantic treaty with the SPP, Security Prosperity Partnership, with the European Union. So this integration is far along under stealth. Can you speak to their master plan?
Yes, certainly. All I can tell so far is that we're dealing with a sort of a European Soviet system, and of course, all we need to do then is if we then have a North American or an American system which is similar, and it's going that way. Every day you get closer to that situation. It's only a matter of time before those two power blocks come together. The only thing at the moment that is stopping that going forward at an even faster rate is a fundamental hostility in the European bureaucracy and parliament, a fundamental hostility to the United States, a fundamental hostility to the concept of free trade and capitalism. There's a fundamental hostility to this. So there's actually a sort of a theoretical problem that needs to be overcome. But as soon as that is overcome, you've got to understand that these, as I'm sure your listeners do, that the senior politicians, they don't have anything to do with the NHS. They go into private wards. They're privately looked after. If they have a brain tumor, it's dealt with immediately. But senior politicians do not send their children to the same schools. They do not go to the same hospitals. Did you know, for example, I wonder if you did, that the bureaucracy in Brussels, all the civil servant bureaucracy, which is enormous, don't pay tax? Did you know that? They don't pay income tax. Their salaries are free of tax. So consequently, the more they vote for centralism, statism, and high tax and high spending, they're actually out of the loop themselves.
Now, that's a key point you just made.
Is unaffected.
That's a key point. Our own Congress here exempts themselves from most of their fines and fees. There's a law that they have to pay taxes, but 50+% have been caught just not paying. Go back over that, though, because I was not aware of that. I knew that went on in a lot of communist countries. They are exempt from their own taxes. That is the greatest mark of tyranny, is when it's like Animal Farm, 4 legs good, 2 legs better. I mean, this is just unbelievable. Say that again. I'm doing a double take here.
There's something called a sort of there's a notional sort of international tax which is put on the bureaucrats, which is it's only marginal. It's something like 10%, whereas everybody else in Europe, including me, incidentally, as an MEP, I pay British tax. I pay about 45% of my income in tax. But the actual bureaucracy which makes the laws, so the people who actually make the law do not pay taxes as ordinary individuals. They pay very marginal tax. They also don't pay VAT, so they drive big Range Rovers. They buy a brand new Range Rover or Mercedes and BMW, and there's no VAT. Now, VAT on the continent on the car is 20%. So imagine an immediate 20% discount on your new car. It's just like the Soviet system. It's just like the Politburo.
Unbelievable. Yeah. Everybody's standing in sausage lines, but all the communist officials have 2 or 3 villas and racehorses. So they are exempt. They are a superclass who give themselves immunity from taxes, just like Interpol and the UN can run around the world engaging whatever crimes they want, and they're given diplomatic immunity. This is the internationalist superclass that Rothkopf talks about in his book, Superclass. Our final segment with our amazing guest, European Union member. By the way, this is giant news. Hillary Clinton's Saul Alinsky thesis, which has been classified, has been released in full. We were reading over this some during the break. It is absolute communism, how she's a communist. Oh, God help us. I mean, how did we ever let this? Folks, communists killed 3, 4, 5 times, depending on which numbers you look at, more than Hitler. I mean, there's nothing worse than communist. These are just dirty thieves. They don't care about the poor, and they know it. Look, I was having an incredible conversation, too, with the European Union member of Parliament, Godfrey-Bloom. I didn't know that they were exempt from tax. During the break, I Googled it. There was mainstream news. He told me that the European Union bureaucrats, that the average Brit doesn't even know this. Then he went further explaining this to me. Continue, sir.
Yeah, they don't pay any tax. They pay a standard basic rate of tax, which is something, a minimal amount, like 10%. It's a token amount. They don't pay any sales tax, as you call it over there, when they buy a new car, which is 20%. So their new Mercedes is 20% cheaper than anybody else's. So they're always voting for big government. They're voting for more tax. They're voting for more spending, and yet they don't contribute to any of this.
Well, our founders went to war over taxation without representation. You already have that because they're unelected. But this is even worse. They are openly do as I say, not as I do. I mean, that is tyranny. I mean, it doesn't get any more bona fide than that.
It's interesting you made a point earlier, Alex, about the East Europeans. You know, some of the East Europeans who weren't part of the communist regime, the ordinary working people in places like Poland and the Czech Republic, are suddenly beginning to realize what they've stepped into. And it was the Czech president, President Klaus, on his outgoing speech in the parliament, said, you know, I know all about this. I went to prison under the Soviet regime, and what we're seeing is a Soviet regime. The European Union is totally modeled on the Soviet system. It isn't modeled on the United States. People are being told in Western Europe that the European Union is basically, the basic pattern is the United States. It's nothing of the sort. It's the Soviet Union. And all these things I've been talking about today prove it, do they not?
And for those that haven't studied this parliamentary setup and the bureaucracy, it really is set up like the Politburo. It really is set up to do whatever it wants, whenever it wants. It really is dictatorial. And now they're saying they have EU arrest warrants, and Obama has amended the Interpol agreement to allow them to do basically whatever they want inside the United States.
If the European arrest warrant, if somebody says, say in Austria, for example, that they don't like gypsies, and that's considered to be xenophobia under the Austrian law, they can arrest you when you go home with a European arrest warrant. They don't need a magistrate's warrant. They don't need a prima facie case. There's no concept of habeas corpus, so they can arrest you. A foreigner can arrest you. He can take you to Austria. They can imprison you without charge for as long as they like. And this happened to an Englishman only about 3 months ago. And people were saying, how on earth could this happen? And it's happened because nobody knows about it. There's a deliberate disinformation, and most of it stems from our own BBC, our own British Broadcasting Service, which had such a wonderful reputation in the war and post-war, has now been taken over by these people. And so people just don't know. And, of course, information, and Stalin said, knowledge is power. And if people don't have the knowledge, and they won't find it in the newspapers, and they won't find it on BBC, they're going to have to work to find it. But it's not that difficult. You just have to make an effort.
Well, he's an economist. He's a member of the European Union Parliament. He's Godfrey-Bloom. Look forward to speaking to you again in the future, sir. Keep up the fight against tyranny.
Great pleasure.